The Starr and D'Amico Show brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. Need blanks for your next event or club? Check out cheapesttshirts.ca. No minimum order, free shipping over $350. Same-day shipping on lots of items. Affordable, Canadian, ready to print your design. Brought to you by Catherine Prince at Remax Platine, your Montreal real estate connection. Call her at 514-702-2474 or email Catherine with a K, Catherine at catherineprince.com. If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest with confidence, Catherine Prince, your key to the city's property market. Brought to you by McLean's Pub. Looking for a lively downtown spot with great food and atmosphere? Come to McLean's Pub on Peel Street. Classic pub eats, plenty of beer, and all the sports on all the screens. Grab your friends and make McLean's your go-to place tonight. Brought to you by Cabletel, your full-service telecom partner for business and home. From structured cabling and phone systems to Wi-Fi, cameras, and alarms, Cabletel keeps you connected, secure, and performing at your best. Your partner for the future. It's Cabletel. Well, welcome to Wednesday. What an eventful Tuesday it was. Shout out to Little Bear at littlebearonline.com. Chuck and Eddie have all your holiday pets needs. They care about your pet as much as you do. I encourage you to shop in person. You got to meet this wonderful staff, family-owned business that cares about your pet, and all the best brands at the best prices. You can browse online there, and they have online shopping too. Just go to littlebearonline.com. Marco D'Amico, one of my favorite insiders on this Wednesday afternoon. Happy lunchtime. Already shaking his head.
Not an
What's
insider.
up, brother? What's up, brother? How's it going today?
Pretty good. I think it's a fun. It's always a fun week. The week before the rosters freeze, I think a lot of teams are trying to get some last minute business done before the holidays, and then we definitely see what's up. But it's always an interesting time, and especially when you're the Montreal Canadiens, right in the thick of things. Emotions and tempers are going to be pretty high.
Indeed. Good afternoon. Good morning. I know we got people, Marco, from all over the place joining us as the show unfolds. Following the Montreal Canadiens, who couldn't follow up their dominant performance over the Edmonton Oilers on Sunday night, losing to the Philadelphia Flyers in another big game. Philly rolled into Montreal, losers of 3 straight. They were tied with the Canadiens on points. Montreal, as a result of that 4-1 loss, 3-1 empty netter, kind of a mistake-filled game, a lackluster performance from the Montreal Canadiens, and Jacob Fowler makes his Bell Center debut. Unfortunately, the guys in front of him didn't have their A stuff. But let's start with, before the puck was dropped, Marco, the big news came in 2 waves. One, Mike Matheson, day-to-day, didn't play last night, out with an upper body injury. And then Sam Montembeault accepts the conditioning assignment with the Laval Rocket. The Rocket have 2 games on the road at Cleveland, and Montembeault's obviously going to play. And then, as it's been reported, going to join the team in Pennsylvania on the second leg of a home-and-home with the Penguins on Sunday. So let's start with the reaction to Sam Montembeault accepting the conditioning assignment to Laval. I mean, there really wasn't another option here other than saying, screw you, trade me, because I'm not going to Laval. I mean, the team and him were kind of out of options. So I like this move by the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately when you look at Sam Montembeault's situation, I don't think he was going to find his confidence, in the NHL, and the CBA offers them the flexibility to send a player down for up to 14 days or 3
That's
games,
right.
whichever one happens first. And kudos to Samuel Montembeault, because again, the player has to sign off on this. It's not like when you waive a player or when you send a young player down that's waiver exempt, you need the player's permission. So, there's no way that the NHL can challenge this move. It's written right into the CBA. So not a problem. And in this situation, because he hasn't played, I think it's been over a week now he hasn't played. It's totally fair game as well. Like, no one needs to really be asked about this. It's a mechanism that's allowed within the CBA,
Well,
so
that's
that
it.
they don't have to utilize waivers.
Yeah,
Not something to worry about. The league will
Yeah.
not investigate this. The Canadiens have done this more than one occasion.
Correct.
So I wouldn't necessarily worry in regards of blowback. It happens quite often.
Yeah.
What I would say, though, is that, it offers Sam Montembeault an opportunity to rebuild from the base. And I think that's the key, is that you're able to rebuild from the start. And when you get to a point where you're at rock bottom from a technique perspective, maybe giving him some time to go down there and work with Marco Marciano, the goalie coach of the Laval Rocket. It's helped other goalies before. I think it'll help him change maybe the way he views it, the way he sees it. So to me, it could be a good idea. He'll be there for 2 games, the 2 games against the Cleveland Monsters.
Yep.
And then he'll be called up, as we've been told, for Sunday. He'll meet the team in Pittsburgh. So that's the conditioning stint. He'll get those 2 games in. He'll come back. And again, the benefit is you change your mind. You get into a new working environment. You reset completely. And then you kind of stack games. And I think that's what's important, is if he can go into the AHL and put in some good performances, well, then at that point, one will eventually stack over the other, and he'll have momentum coming into the NHL as he gets called back up.
And again, just to reiterate, for those that perhaps aren't as familiar with some of the mechanisms, Marco, within the CBA that allows the Canadiens to make a move like this, as it's already been pointed out, Sam Montembeault had to accept the assignment to Laval, which he did. There really, as far as reports go, there really was no pushback. But also the timeline, right, Marco, that he can spend 14 days with the Laval Rocket, the Habs AHL affiliate, without having to go through the waiver process. This is part of the detail within the conditioning assignment. So for those wondering about why is it that he is waiver exempt, because you have that timeline within the send down or demotion, if you want to call it that, to Laval, to be able to work that again under the labeling of conditioning assignment. So moving to Mike Matheson and the upper body injury day to day, didn't play yesterday. I guess this was a reminder of just how valuable a piece Mike Matheson is to this organization, for the role he plays, for the minutes he eats, for the situations he's always involved in, Marco, because one of the things that, resulted in the 4-1 loss to me was the Canadiens got burned for the mistakes they made. Nick Suzuki on the first goal, Ivan Demidov on the second goal, Jacob Fowler, lack of communication, to give up the puck behind his net that resulted in Bobby Brink making it 3-1, essentially the kill shot. I'm not saying Mike Matheson eliminates all of those mistakes, but that veteran presence on a young team that makes mistakes, they got burned by a pretty tight defensive unit in Philadelphia, by Philadelphia last night, didn't they?
Absolutely. And Philadelphia didn't give him anything. And I think that's the key, right? Is they play very low. Their centers, Christian Dvorak's line was excellent against Nick Suzuki's, and just really holding down the middle of the ice and not allowing them the ability to enter the high danger area. So from an offensive perspective, yes. From a defensive perspective, I mean, I think the Canadiens played a pretty solid defensive game overall. There's just 3 unfortunate turnovers, 3 goals. Just very opportunistic Florida Panthers, Philadelphia Flyers in this situation. And I think that's what makes the whole thing kind of sting, because you look at it on 5-on-5, they were pretty even the whole game. And so where I think they miss a guy like Mike Matheson is that I feel like some of those turnovers maybe don't happen. I feel like Mike Matheson is a player that, when used in the offensive zone, his skating often overwhelms the defense and forces them to open up a little bit, which the Canadiens, I found, didn't do enough last night. Martin St. Louis actually mentioned that the forwards not using their defensemen enough when they're down low, right? They're staying low. They're trying to do board shuffles, right? Pass the puck along the boards, but they're not actually connecting with their defensemen, which would then force the Philadelphia Flyers to open up the defensive system. And that's where they would be able to attack open ice. The Canadiens, unfortunately, were not able to figure that out last night. And that's, in my estimation, why they weren't able to connect on a lot of the offensive opportunities that, for example, a guy like Lane Hudson was preparing on a platter for a lot of his teammates.
Man, what a third period by 48. I mean, what a beast, what a price of admission player. So special. And I know this fan base appreciates watching a player like that. I think this market's been starved for a player with such dynamic ability. And, when I was watching Lane Hudson play, especially in that third period, where it's like you could see this switch being flipped in his game, where he's like, fine, I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to try to get something going. And I was thinking about Ivan Demidov watching Hudson play. And I hope for the fan base, for the excitement level, Marco, that when Demidov gets more comfortable as he ages, as he gets more games under his belt, that he too can be one of those players that says, okay, I've got this tonight. You watch me shine, watch me take a game over. Because the skill level, again, he rang it off the post. There was that fast, electrifying release. The only on the replay did we see that it wasn't so much the glove of Vladar, but it was the iron that Demidov caught. Which takes me down the path to talk about the line combinations. Is it time that Martin St. Louis perhaps shuffles the deck a little bit? Because there was a point in the game last night where I'm like, is Zachary Bolduc even playing? Is he even on the ice tonight for the Canadiens? I don't want to be too harsh, but I didn't really notice him. And I wonder, is it time to maybe look at, is Alexander Texier a potential option? This guy is on an absolute heater. Looks so good in this system since he's been acquired by the Canadiens, Marco.
I think he's been one of the better 5-on-5 players since he's come into the team. And, you know, I've had the pleasure of talking to Alex post game the last three, basically since Toronto.
Right.
And, you know, first of all, absolutely in love with Montreal already right off the bat. Like, it's just incredible how he's connected. His mom is actually here, which I found pretty cool. Yeah, I found pretty cool. And, you know, she's at home. She feels at home because, you know, a lot of French in Montreal, and, you know, can you blame him? But one of the things that that he's really been focused on is trying to play to his strengths. And I think his strengths play right into a Martin St. Louis style of hockey, which is speed, tenacity, and going to the high danger areas. And that's exactly where all of his goals have come from, right? It's always in those high danger areas, always taking the shot, decisiveness in his play. So do I think he can jolt the top line? Yeah, I made the suggestion last night, you know, when we were on the press box, like maybe swap Bolduc and a guy like Texier, because as much as I thought Bolduc was the most visible player on his line last night, and that is a problem. That is a problem. But with Alex Texier, you know what he's going to give you. Honest, very straightforward kind of role that he has. And in the absence of Alex Newhook, he, I think, is the next best option if they want to keep Juraj Slafkovsky on the second line.
Right.
My counter to that, and I think this is going to get a lot of people excited, I think it's time to see Ivan Demidov on the top line.
Man, oh man, how long I've been saying that? Feels like forever. I'm ready to see this.
But I think he's ready for it now.
I agree. I mean, personally, I think he was, you know, I love the pushback on the Rasmus Ristolainen situation last night after Juraj Slafkovsky. I want to talk about Juraj Slafkovsky, in my opinion, committing a cardinal sin yesterday. Not something you should ever be doing on the ice. With the pass from Adam Engstrom that set up the big massive hit at center ice. But is Juraj Slafkovsky ultimately the guy that needs to go back there? As member of the show, Surf points out, last night, a stat put up on the screen, the first line with Slafkovsky plus 50 in scoring opportunities, Marco, a -9. That's a 59-point discrepancy, Marco. I mean, that's a massive decline in opportunities with Suzuki and Caulfield, which maybe also in a roundabout way can explain why, I don't know, Suzuki doesn't look the same to me anymore. I mean, is it him? Is it the absence of Slafkovsky?
I think it's a fair statement to say that we have seen better hockey from Nick Suzuki.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair statement to say. I think part of it is on him, but I think part of it is on the ridiculous amount of work that is asked of him on a regular basis. 21 minutes a night is a lot for any center in the league.
Yeah.
Especially one that was playing, and I still believe is playing through something. And then to give him the defensive responsibilities, and then to be the top line, to be a shutdown line at the same time as being an offensive line. Like, I just don't understand sometimes. And, you know, this is where, for example, a guy like Phil Danault would make a ton of sense for this team, is that he would take a lot of those responsibilities away, because whatever line Danault would be on would be the shutdown line, and Suzuki could focus on thrashing the other team offensively. And I think, you know, his energies would be focused on that. Not that I don't think he can do both, but it's heavy when there are two centers on this team that Martin St. Louis truly trusts. And one of them is never going to give you that kind of offensive production, though his line has been much better of it at his late. in large part due to Alex Texier. So
Yeah.
what I would like to see potentially, and especially with Kirby Dach potential, back, I would say probably within the next week to 10 days at most, is, I think that returning Baldzuk with Kirby Dach when he comes back could make sense. I'd like to see Ivan Demidov on the top line. And I think Alex Texier, is a key player that you can move up and down your lineup. And Juraj Slafkovsky, is the guy that would hold down that second line with a Kirby Dach and really kind of, make it a harder line to play with, because those are three guys that like to hit and that aren't very small in the way that they play. So I'd be interested to see the combination, because when Kirby Dach comes back, they're going to have to mix up the lines just a little bit.
Let's get in. We'll get into some interesting news that Marco and I will have an expanded view on tomorrow. It'll be up for members this afternoon on the St. Louis Blues, maybe having some sort of organizational shift. More details on that up on the channel. Members get access to that material ASAP. In the meantime, Marco's tweet yesterday on the Phil Danault situation is getting close to 1 million views, where Marco at 2:02 yesterday afternoon reported sources indicate that Phil Danault has asked for a trade in Los Angeles. His camp hopes a deal gets done sooner than later, prior to the trade freeze, which again lands at midnight on December 20th. The LA Kings are willing to wait, look for a player-for-player trade. Habs, Devils, Carolina, some of the teams to kick tires there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm conflicted on the Phil Danault. I personally don't think he fits, in my opinion, the scheme of what the Canadiens are up to. I'm not so sure they need him. And I'm wondering about what a hypothetical transaction, what would LA be looking for in order to accommodate Phil Danault, Marco? I mean, is it the center? Because I would not trade Owen Beck. I would not trade if they're calling that Owen Beck, they want a center. I'd rather have Owen Beck than Phil Danault.
In a vacuum, I think I could agree. The way the Canadiens are built now, I think I disagree. But I don't think that they'd be looking for a for an Owen Beck type necessarily. I think they'd be looking for a center capable of playing in their top 9 right now and in the future. Because if Los Angeles trades, Phil Danault, Anze Kopitar retires at the end of the year, who are their centers?
Right.
And that's kind of the problem that they're in right now. And so Ken Holland is in absolute no rush to execute on this. The rush is from the player side. The GM has to worry about the GM first. Yeah, you want to work with the player and his agent to try and get a deal done, whether or not you believe that's true or not. I have reason to believe it. What I would say is it becomes a little bit more complicated because, for example, the Canadiens wouldn't be able to just take him in. They would go into LTIR if they do that, and then they would have to make another trade by the time that a guy like Alex Newhook is ready to return. So I don't think that's the avenue they want to go. So it has to be a player for player. And, to speculate on who would become available, I mean, I have to see these guys in the dressing room, so I'm not going to do that. I'll let y'all do that. But what I will tell you is I would be shocked if there wasn't a bottom 6 player, or at least a middle 6 player on the Montreal Canadiens that they would be asking for in exchange for Phil Danault. If the Canadiens were willing to pay that price, Phil Danault would probably be a Montreal Canadien right now. So I don't think that that's where we're at. I think that there are other teams in the mix as well. You look at the Carolina Hurricanes, you look at the New Jersey Devils. They are very much looking to add a left shot center capable of shouldering the load on a second or third line. So it's something to follow. Do I think there's anything imminent on the subject? I would think that if they get the way they want, there would be a deal by Saturday morning at midnight. But there's a world where this stretches out, into January and February. So the Canadiens have kicked tires, have shown interest, of course, but there may not be a trade fit there to make that happen. And I think that's where you have to discern interest from real possibility of trade. Right. And I think something will have to change on one end or another for something like this to go down, or else I think he may actually wind up elsewhere. The Vancouver Canucks, up until the Quinn Hughes trade, were interested in a player like Phil Danault. They got their center in Marco Rossi, so that's cooled. But there are other teams that are interested and would be interested for sure.
Well, like it obviously begs the question, right? In hindsight being what it is, Phil Danault, whether or not he'll be a Canadian again, to be determined. But I think it's a fair question to ask. Did Ken Hughes make a mistake letting Christian Dvorak walk? He signed a 1-year deal in Philadelphia. If the Canadians get Phil Danault, they get him for 1 year at $5.5 million. Dvorak signed for a smidge under that on a 1-year deal in Philly. So, let me ask you the question again. Hindsight being what it is, maybe they made a bad judgment call there on letting Devo walk.
I think that if Devo wasn't playing with Zegras, he wouldn't have the season he's currently having. Right, he's playing top line minutes with their best offensive player who's on a crazy pace. I'm actually asking the questions of why couldn't the Canadians beat the price that the Philadelphia Flyers paid for Trevor Zegras? That's where I'm kind of at. I'm not even worried about Christian Dvorak, right?
Every time I watch Zegras play, I keep thinking about how many in Habs Nation didn't want this guy. He's poison. Don't want him. I've watched him play the Canadians twice. The guys look like an all-star 2 times.
Yep, and physical, and sometimes I apologize for my language sometimes, and I like these players, but he could be a little bit of a shit on the ice, and I love it. I really do love that side of him, that shit disturber side. I do enjoy it, but the speed, the talent, it's just all there. And whether he plays center or whether he plays wing, it's irrelevant. But I think a guy like Christian Dvorak has definitely gotten the rub from playing with him, and so I don't look at the point totals as a defining factor.
Yeah.
But what I do definitely look at is when the Canadians were down and out last season and they came back after the Four Nations, the number 2 center was Christian Dvorak.
Mm-hmm.
They don't make the playoffs last year without that line of Dvorak, Armia, Gallagher,
all day,
Anderson, whichever,
running
roughshot, and Gallagher getting 20 goals, Armia getting, in the teens again, Josh Anderson getting close to 20. It's because they were getting proper bottom 6 depth, and it all came from strong defensive play. And Christian Dvorak, realizing he was in a contract year, needed to, get his point totals up. And boy, did he ever. And he absolutely earned that contract. And the market was what it was. So this is why I consistently say, how much do you think a third or second line center is going to cost you on the open market? Because right now I'm looking at the free agency market. Oh boy, it's thinner than a penny out there. So the
penny's obsolete. That's crazy.
Well, it still exists. Well, I'll call it a nickel.
Yeah.
Right? But it's thin. It's very thin. So the Canadians are going to have to look at this. They're going to have to hope for internal growth, which I feel like they've been getting slowly but surely with Oliver Kapanen. And I think Owen Beck has looked the part again as a fourth line center. I don't think he hurts this team, and he helps them from a position standpoint. But I think a Christian Dvorak would have had the offensive capabilities and the left shot center that they're looking for right now. So to have let that asset go for free is probably where I asked the question. But this goes back to last year where the players begged Kent Hughes not to trade any of these guys. And I 100% agree with it. But to not replace him fundamentally, I get the Canadiens cap situation would have put them in trouble, right? They would have signed Christian Dvorak to the contract that he got. They would have been in LTIR. They would have been an off-season LTIR, right? Which was no bueno. That would have been terrible for them. So then you had to trade Carey Price, and only after they traded Carey Price did they even have $5 million in change of cap space. So they still would have been over the cap. So close, or at least close to it, because if Christian Dvorak's there, then maybe, Joe Veleno doesn't get signed. So they would have been right at the cap. And they would be in LTIR right now if they would have kept him because of all the injuries that they've had and the call-ups they've had to make. So it's a tricky what-if situation, but I don't think anybody in their right mind would have given Christian Dvorak $5 million last year. I think that's just, right off the bat. So was it a mistake to let him go? Not at that price. It was not a mistake. But is it a mistake to not have found that kind of player prior to the start of the season, knowing you were lining yourself up to be one of the youngest teams in the NHL, having lost Armia, having lost Dvorak, having lost Savard? Yes, I do think so. And that is why I believe the Canadiens have interest in more veteran guys like a Nazem Kadri, like a Phil
Yeah.
Danault, like a Ryan O'Reilly. I think that's what they're looking for.
I can't even begin to imagine a couple of days away from the roster freeze for the holidays, right? You drop Nazem Kadri's name. And I've been saying for a while, I love this guy on the Canadiens. I don't give a bleep about the money. The money's the money. And the salary cap's going up. I'm not too concerned about the money. The attitude, his playoff numbers, the advanced metrics on Nazem Kadri are off the charts. He checks so many boxes of what I believe the Canadiens are currently lacking. But with that in mind, Marco, I cannot fathom what the asking price would be for Nazem Kadri. If Calgary says green light go, let the bidding war commence because we're going to move Nazem Kadri, which hasn't been confirmed. We could talk about Barry Trotz talking about asking prices for guys like Ryan O'Reilly, so on and so forth. This is a different conversation. Like the Nazem Kadri ask price, taking on what's left in the contract for an older player, let's say, it would be significant. And I personally, as much as I want him on the Canadiens, because I'll repeat myself, I think he fills a void. I just don't think it's the price worth paying for the long view, personally.
If the Calgary Flames retain, I have
okay,
no problem with that deal.
When's the double retention over?
It is over.
It's over. Okay.
Why would anybody double retain on Nazem Kadri?
No, I thought there was like a timeline on that. I wasn't sure about it.
No, you're fine. But there's going to be no double retention on Nazem Kadri. If there's going to be a single source retention, and the Calgary Flames could be the one to do it. Could be another team, but all I'm saying is, if you can get Nazem Kadri for anything under $5 million, you're flying. You're flying. Pay the price if that's the case. Look at his advanced metrics. He's nuts at 35 years old. He's nuts.
Yeah, it's
doesn't
crazy.
show any sign of slowing down. Yeah. If anyone's concerned about his playoff antics, I mean, things change. I was kind of an unpleasant person 8 years ago as well. And, people mature with time. And Nazem Kadri and I are the same age. So, I put my life experience and I juxtapose it next to his. This is a guy that's a father now that's, a little bit wiser, less of a dirty player, plays hard. And I think that's what the Canadiens miss. So I always look at Nazem Kadri as being the guy. And I'm not sold that the price is going to be astronomical on him based on that. First of all, the no trade clause is going to be a problem. He's got a partial no trade. Canadians aren't on it, but he's got a partial no trade. The age may spook a couple of teams. And then there are a lot of teams that are close to the salary cap that won't be able to do it without significant retention and money going back the other way. I'm looking at for example, Minnesota Wild. And I feel like the Canadiens are one of the few teams that could outbid for him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Look at the Minnesota Wild. They just absolutely, CVD. They completely got rid of their cupboards here. They got very little in the form of other tradable pieces. They're not going to trade Danilo Yurov. He's the only young player they have at center.
Yeah.
And he's playing well. They would probably try to slot him down to the third line and keep Joel Eriksson there and then try to get Kadri as the first. But what do they have to give that Montreal can't beat?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that's where you get into these situations. A lot of these contending teams, I know Florida's poked around. Montreal can beat any offer that Florida puts ahead of them if they really want a Kadri. Right? And we talked about this. Montreal has consistently said when the right player comes around, we are willing to overpay. I don't know if the overpay would be for a guy like Kadri.
Yeah.
But knowing Kadri and knowing how much he appreciates Montreal, I think there would be an understanding about going to Montreal if the offer was right for Craig Conroy. But we're not there yet because they have not necessarily made him virtually available.
Right.
They're still waiting for the thumbs up on Calgary ownership to be able to make these kinds of moves. So nothing serious on that front either. But when you look at Kadri, the analytics are nuts.
Dude,
in terms of his scoring, crazy considering the team he plays on right now.
Well, that's I'm reading.
I couldn't even imagine.
The comments,
Marco, imagine.
Pass. Are we serious? Have we looked at this? He ranks 6th in the National Hockey League for chances generated on the forecheck, 8th for chances in all categories. Ranks 11th in the NHL, not on the Flames, in the NHL for time spent in the offensive zone when he has the puck on his stick. So if we're talking about alleviating pressure from Nick Suzuki, you're not going to find a better option right now than Nazem Kadri unless the Montreal Canadiens do something seismic with everybody else. 28 points in 33 games. Look at his playoff numbers. Fine. You want to talk about the turnover? The turnover rate is quite high. That's over 17%. According, and this is data from Sports Logic.
Yeah, here's the one I got for you guys. Okay. Would you give up a first, a prospect, and a middling roster player for Nazem Kadri? Or would you give up Michael Hage, a first, Caden Goalie, and potentially another prospect a la Bryce Pickford for Tage Thompson?
Oh, no. No. God, no. Not Tage Thompson. For that package? No frickin' way. No. Not even close.
This
I thought
is
you were
what
going
I'm
to
getting.
drop like
Everybody,
Robert Thomas's name or so when you're listing
even
off
Robert
that grocery
Thomas.
list. I'm like,
Robert Thomas. You guys don't want Kadri, but you don't want to trade Michael Hage.
Right.
Pick a lane. It ain't gonna be. It's gonna be one or the other. So if you want the star center, prepare to pay a top prospect.
100%.
You're not gonna Noah Dobson anybody in this situation. Noah Dobson funneled his way into Montreal using his RFA status. If you want an established center with a given contract, you're going to have to legitimately pay Michael Hage, David Reinbacher, you name it, one of the two at least, and then some for one of those elite centers. Look at what Quinn Hughes went for a top, like an elite number one center. Begin that kind of a package.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it's mirrored. I'm not saying it's going to be the same, but the basis of top prospect, first round pick, other roster player, Liam Ogren, I think, is an NHLer at this point. Well, Tage Thompson is currently playing at center for the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's
almost by chance.
But some have argued he plays better on the wing than he does at center.
Possibly. But I think Kadri's a better center than Tage Thompson in terms of being able to play the position.
Agreed.
But I think that Tage Thompson is by far a better player in terms of how long he can be that kind of player. The difference point is the price point for each of those players is going to be very different.
Yes.
Very different.
How much does the money worry you about, there's a lot of, pushback.
I just said it. Calgary is willing to retain on Nazem Kadri. I am not worried whatsoever.
That's it.
A third line center, like we were just talking about Christian Dvorak, he's making $5 million.
Yeah.
A third line center on today's open market easily gets $5 million long term. If you can get Nazem Kadri at $5 million or less from Calgary, he's worth it all day, every day. You put him at your number two. When Michael Hage is ready to take over, you flip him. And then he becomes a very experienced number three capable of playing hard. So it's very difficult, and I go back to the Noah Dobson thing because I think people see the Noah Dobson trade and they think that Kent Hughes can work this crazy voodoo magic on other players. Yeah, he's a fine negotiator, but understand what Noah Dobson did. He made.
Oh yeah.
The Canadiens put an offer that Darsh liked.
Yeah.
And then Noah Dobson limited the market by saying he wanted to stay in the East. Had a couple of teams that he was interested in and decided to take less to stay in Montreal. He was out of Columbus's price point when it came to the contract, but he was willing to take less to go to Montreal. So he used the leverage that he did, not unlike Jacob Trouba did in Winnipeg, where he was like, I'm going to re-sign here. No one was going to give the big package for a Noah Dobson if he would not sign in Montreal. Or sorry, if he would not sign with the team after that 1 year. No one was going to give the big package, but they were going to give the big package if you come with an 8-year extension. That's where Montreal was able to take advantage of the situation, because I know for a fact that there are teams out west that could have beaten that offer. But because there was preference and because he had a little bit of leverage, the Canadiens were able to take advantage of the situations, still paid a good price. I mean, I commend Matthew Darsh for getting that much, because it's a good comparable to what Seth Jones got when he got traded from Columbus to Chicago. So I would be very weary of thinking that that's the template. That's an exception. That's not the template. You want the template? You look at Jack Eichel. You want the template? You look at a guy like Quinn Hughes. You want star-studded players in their prime? you got to give up the 4 first-round pick assets to be able to do that. So if you have a Nazem Kadri, who, may be on the older side, but is probably going to play for the next 4 years while you wait for Michael Hage to become that number one, it opens up your window now and for the future without sacrificing your top prospect, because Calgary wouldn't be at a point in their leveraging where they could afford to ask for a Michael Hage or a David Reinbacher. That's the way I see it. So I don't necessarily mind Kadri being in the view, because he's still so effective in his later years, and he's so well taken care of physically that I don't see him breaking down. Same thing with a Mike Matheson. So if we have faith in Mike Matheson's longevity, how can we not have faith in Nazem Kadri's?
Well, because
to this day, he's still Calgary's best player.
Yeah, because Mike Matheson plays for the Canadiens, and Hab fans watch their players, and they love their players. I would bet my golf clubs, if Nazem Kadri became a Montreal Canadien, this chat, the majority of people, dumping on the Kadri possibility, he is everything that is missing for the Montreal Canadiens. And who cares about the money? There's going to be salary retention. The cap is growing exponentially. Stop worrying about the money. It's really a non-factor. What wasn't a factor yesterday, if we can move on for a second, and I want to get back to the trade circle, and with the roster freeze a couple of days away now, Juraj Slafkovsky committed a cardinal sin yesterday. You can't be doing what he did. You can't be showing up your teammates on the ice, man. You can't be doing that to Adam Engstrom on that pass that put him in the spot where Ristolainen ran him over. In my interpretation, I thought it was a clean hit. It was a clean hit. And as the panel on RDS pointed out, if Mike Matheson had made that pass instead of Adam Engstrom, there's no way in hell that Slafkovsky reacts the way he did on the ice, the way he did on the bench with his helmet off. And I thought for a second, I said, oh, he's angry. He is angry. But as it turned out, he was angry at Adam Engstrom. I thought he was angry maybe at the hit or the fact that he put himself in that position. And I thought to myself, okay, let's see what he does. Let's see what he does. Are we going to see angry Slav, or are we going to see this beast take a game over? Instead, Marco, this is one of the very rare times, is it fair to say, where Juraj Slafkovsky wasn't all that implicated throughout the game.
I thought Slafkovsky played a good game, but obviously I think that hit took him out of it from an emotional perspective in terms of a concentration thing. Look, I mean, would I have looked back at my teammate after a suicide pass? Yeah.
You could look back, but you can't do what he did. You can't do that.
I mean, it's a young team. Emotions are flaring. It's up to the leadership group of that team and the coaching staff to address it.
Yeah, in the room in the first period, not on the ice, not on the bench. He's still barking at the guy nonstop. This is where we talk about veteran. And look, Marty St. Louis is a Hall of Fame player. Brendan Gallagher is a hard-nosed hockey player. Nick Suzuki's been around the league for a long time. He's the captain of this team. All I'm saying is it's a learning experience for both Adam Engstrom, who put his teammate in a bad spot, and a learning experience for Juraj Slafkovsky. But ultimately, you take that to the room all day, every day. It's a cardinal sin. You do not show up teammates on the ice, no matter what level you play at. You do not do that. And you learn from that. That's what that was yesterday.
I think so. I think Adam Engstrom is a very intelligent defenseman. I think he continued to play well the rest of the game after that. So I'm not necessarily worried, but those are the kinds of passes you can get away from in the AHL.
Yeah, I agree.
And you get to the NHL and you learn that, defensemen play tighter. The checkers will check, obviously only when they're the ones doing the checking, not when they're getting cross-checked. But you have way less time to make a play. And Juraj Slafkovsky received puck, 0.5 seconds later got hit. Like, there was no play to be made, right? So instead of panicking with the puck to try and get it up as quick as possible, which I understand, you're a young player, you're trying to move things up quickly, I think that it makes more sense to maybe rifle it down on the wing or try to get ahead of it and skate it out yourself. The problem is that what the Flyers really did well last night is they played 3-2, right? And so whenever you'd come up the ice, they'd box you to the sides and you'd get crunched by the defenseman on the edge. That's because they have a strong center playing in the middle of the ice that's always pushing you to the side, be it Couturier, be it Dvorak, you name it. Defensive centers, they have up the wazoo. No problem with that. It's the offense that they look for. So when you're playing against that kind of style, what's your solution? And for a young player like Adam Engstrom, he hasn't figured it out because he hasn't had to play that kind of style to that kind of speed on a regular basis. So Yuri Slafkovsky, I think he's also a young player. He's also 21. He's also going to be maturing, right?
Yep.
He's been around for 4 years, but
for sure,
I have to remember that him too, at 21, I would have been fuming in his spot. But that's what leadership is for. I'm sure the two are fine now, but in the moment, yeah, I think that was not a very good pass to make. But I think we're looking at Yuri Slafkovsky and we're dawning on that. I'd rather spend time on the fact that Ivan the Goon Demidov went after Ristolainen, and boy, did Ristolainen go down easy.
Yeah, listen, I mean, you can't gloss over the Slafkovsky moment on the ice yesterday. I mean, you got pros like Vinny Damphousse and Benoit Brunet taking huge issue with that. But at the end of the day, it's not something to harp on. It's a learning moment, and the Canadiens have a deep coaching staff and some veterans on their roster. But I wondered when Demidov went after Ristolainen, and Ristolainen didn't even look at him. But I wondered how many cross-checks until the penalty was called. Because the first cross-check that kind of knocked him down a little bit to the hip kidney area, I didn't think was worthy of a penalty, but Demidov just wouldn't let him go. Just wouldn't stop going after him.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I think, one thing you can never really say to Demidov or say about Demidov is he doesn't play with passion. And I think in games like that, I would rather see that from him than him skate away.
Yeah.
All right. And he's not happy right now, Ivan Demidov. He's frustrated, would like to take over games and be more involved and, be a little bit more aggressive in trying to get the team up from an offensive perspective. But when he sees a guy go down, that's what I want on a team. That's what I want to see. I want to see a guy, even if he's a skill guy, you just crunched a defenseman just like that, exposed. It was a clean hit, but I like the fact that Demidov turned around and said, not going to jive with me, and went right after the source. Unfortunate that a penalty came from it, but those are the kind of penalties that you remember as a team. It's a good penalty to take in that sense because it builds character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in Demidov's situation, it also makes it a whole lot easier to set the tone with the team. Like, we're not going to be pushed around. We're not going to be doing this. We're not going to be doing that if you're one of the players. I liked it. And in games, as the games get tougher, and they will get tougher and more physical as we get down the stretch into February and March and April, that kind of attitude is going to be the attitude you're going to want from a team trying to make the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like the attitude, no doubt. I like the fact that Josh Anderson had 5 hits in that game. And it's funny, we're back to the old whack-a-mole situation that Arpon Basu from The Athletic brought up with Martin St. Louis last week, where we were talking about where are the veterans, where's that playoff version of Josh Anderson? How come we haven't seen that? Where are the goals from Jake Evans? Can Brendan Gallagher provide more? And all of those things have been corrected. Anderson playing better, scoring. Joe Veleno scoring. Alex Texier scoring. Brendan Gallagher playing more consistent in terms of going to the net and occasionally getting rewarded. But on the other side, you're looking for more goals now from your more talented players, right? So the old whack-a-mole syndrome rears its ugly head. But the amount of missed shots, the fact that the Montreal Canadiens, there are some jarring numbers in that game yesterday. The Canadiens had 10 shots on goal on home ice again through 40 minutes of play. But they had 22 missed shots yesterday. I mean, that is a massive, massive numbers. You had guys ripping pucks left, right, and center. But more often than not, I think they finished with the same total. I think there were 22 shots and 22 missed shots. But Noah Dobson, I think, had 9 shot attempts. 4 missed the net, 5 were blocked. I mean, credit to the Philadelphia Flyers, who brought a very structured game to the Bell Center yesterday, man.
Yeah, well,
that was not the Edmonton Oilers on defense yesterday.
Exactly. And I think Martin St. Louis brought us up quite well. They cocoon in front of the net. Nothing gets through. They collapse onto their goalie, and then Vladar had to make the timely saves here and there. But that's what I've been calling for the Montreal Canadiens to do in their defensive system for a while, is close the shooting lanes and clog up the passing lanes. And the only way that you're going to be able to beat a system like that is if you have fluid puck possession. And the only time it actually did open up for the Canadiens is when Lane Hudson in the third period decided to start dancing the cucaracha in the offensive zone with the puck, and it forced double coverage. What does that do? It opens up the center, or it opens up the point. And that's exactly how they were able to get. They doubled their shot count from the first two periods in the third period. Not by chance, because they were opening up those lanes. They had possession. They had time. They had chances in period 1 and 2. But it was only when they started spreading out the Philadelphia Flyers that they start actually generating like tangible offense. And I think that's where, you even look back to Alex Texier's goal. What did he do? He took advantage of the soft ice right in the middle. He just slid himself right in. Nice pass from Jake Evans.
Exactly.
And that I feel like the Canadiens don't do enough of. And that's why, for example, I feel like the top line misses a guy like Juraj Slafkovsky, because usually Juraj is the one that's playing in that middle of the ice and creating space and getting double covered. And that helps the Canadiens drive, outnumbered possession. You're not seeing that right now. And that needs to happen with more consistency. The only player other than Hudson that was doing that with regularity last night, I found, was Texier. And credit to him. Again, we talked about it. This is a guy I think that should continue to be getting the minutes that he's getting. And I think eventually when Kirby Dach comes back and other forwards come back, he'll continue to be as vital in terms of secondary scoring.
Speaking of players injured, great to see at Brossard this morning, the Canadiens held an optional practice. And there was Caden Goalie, helmet on, very light equipment on, deking out a maze of pucks in Brossard at their practice facility. So nice to see the young man back on skates, stick handling, starting to get the muscle memory kind of back. And the timeline for Caden Goalie is anywhere between January 8th and January 22nd. We'll see as we get closer to the Christmas break if Kirby Dach can slot in maybe a game. If they're lucky, maybe he gets a couple of games before the Christmas break as the marathon continues right through mid-January, where they're playing all the time. They got a bunch of back-to-backs still on the table. They're going to host Chicago tomorrow, and then it's a home-and-home with the Penguins Saturday and Sunday, and that's where the expectation is Sam Montembeault rejoins the team Sunday night in Pittsburgh after taking his conditioning assignment with the Laval Rocket. The Rocket have 2 games coming up at Cleveland. Obviously, he's going to play one of those games, right? Maybe 2. We'll see how it all shakes out. But in the here and now, when we talk about the ebbs and flows of this Canadiens team, back and forth, limited practice, travel, back home, how does Martin St. Louis navigate that? We talk about, is it time to put Slafkovsky there? We're talking about options on the first line, Zach Bolduc, Alex Texier. It's hard to find consistency when your team isn't consistent to begin with. Look how they played against Edmonton. Look how they played against Philadelphia. Who knows? It's a mystery box what the team is going to look like against Chicago tomorrow night, Marco.
Yeah, in terms of the overall team consistency, it's a little frustrating. I understand fans for sure. How do you look so calm and composed against the Edmonton Oilers and then not have any of it against the Philadelphia Flyers? Well, my honest opinion, I think they gave the same amount of effort in both games. It was just a tight game yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
And, when it comes to, the way that they play or the way that they bring about the offense, when you're playing against a team that collapses onto its goalie and doesn't spread out for you because they don't play man-to-man, they play zone defense. That's where the Canadiens' offense goes to die, because they don't have guys that bring the puck to the middle of the ice fearlessly or go to the middle of the ice fearlessly. It's very perimeter. And, when the Canadiens have success, it's when they go to those high danger areas. And I think when you're a team like Montreal right now, it's almost disconnected between the forwards and the defensemen in the offensive zone. I don't feel like, outside of Dobson and now Hudson, I don't think that there's a shooting threat on the Canadiens' blue line. I really, really don't. I like that Engstrom does it from time to time, but because there's no legitimate shooting threat, teams just play low against the Canadiens because they know that if it's going to go to the point, it's just going to go from defenseman to around the boards again. They're not going to take a point shot, which is why, for example, a guy like Igor Shesterkin was so caught off guard by Arbor Jackie's shot on Saturday night because they don't usually shoot from the point. When you do your homework on the Canadiens, I've seen it on boards in the opposing dressing room. A clog middle, play middle, low high. Like that's what is happening against them. I think when it comes to their consistency, their effort, I don't think the effort is lacking. I think that there's a lack of adaptability. And I think that's the biggest thing is if you can't adapt to the system being used by the opposition, you're not going to win. And saying it's a tight game isn't enough. You have to be able to take advantage of systems. If they play a certain way, every system is beatable. There is no perfect system or else everybody would play the same system.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you beat how do you beat zone defense? How? Very simple. You play to the extremities of the zone, you spread them out, and then you have players that go into the soft ice that opens up and they take advantage. The Canadiens don't have many of those. That's why they're looking to get bigger in their team and more physical and have guys that can drive the net. That's what they're looking for. That's what they did when they drafted Juraj Slafkovsky, is they were looking for that kind of player. When a team plays man-to-man defense, how do you beat them? By cycling and passing and moving the puck quickly, so that when you are doing your crossovers in the defensive zone, they lose coverage and you're able to have an odd man situation. There are tactics for all of these. So for me, it's the Canadiens' adaptability to those situations that hurt them, because they could have beaten the Philadelphia Flyers yesterday, in my honest opinion. Obviously, the Flyers were much more opportunistic, absolutely.
For sure.
I think that at the end of the day, too many missed shots, too many, high glove hand kind of shots that just sailed over the net. Too many of those.
Yep.
But I feel like the reason for that is because the Canadiens don't play close enough when they take their shots. So they always low percentage, and the chances of them flying over the net, very high.
Yeah, we've seen them lately. It's been a little bit of a trend. At least I believe I've noticed from the Montreal Canadiens when in terms of the advanced scouting on the opposition goaltender, right? Doing it against the Edmonton Oilers, doing it against Shesterkin, Tristan Jarry, going high, and trying that yesterday. Demidov obviously ringy-diggy off the post. And we'll see what the Chicago Blackhawks have up their sleeves. But I did not mind the game Martin St. Louis coached yesterday. I thought he managed the minutes for his players quite well. And again, we're talking about, players that right now, based on circumstance, are probably in their wrong chairs. Like Alex Carrier has talked about the fact that he's not the most comfortable. He's lost confidence carrying the puck. He was supposed to be, if everything had gone right in terms of injuries and whatnot, he was supposed to be the guy that was going to be the next David Savard in terms of the more traditional defensive defenseman. But now he's tasked with kind of playing this top four role, which I think we can all admit, watching Alex Carey, he's not a top four everyday defenseman, but that's just the reality of the situation. Arbor Jacki had his moments yesterday with Adam Engstrom. I thought Noah Dobson was okay again yesterday, and I thought they handled the situation of losing a leader in Mike Matheson quite well. What did the eye test? How did you look at Jacob Fowler? Like, in his last two games, I like Jacob Fowler. Don't get me wrong, but there was something about how confident he looked in his debut against the Penguins that I haven't seen him look the same. I hope I'm explaining that well enough. He just hasn't looked the same to me in his last two starts.
I think he's looked the exact same.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that a lot of the goals that are being scored on is his team, unfortunately, letting him down. The only one that you could honestly look at is the third goal, the miscue.
Yeah.
But I spoke to Lane Hudson after the game, and he's like, "That's on me, man. We didn't communicate with him. We didn't tell him to pass the puck. We didn't tell him there was somebody behind him. He just assumed that person coming was a teammate, but it was obviously Matvei Michkov, and so on and so forth, right?" And there's a joke to be made about this. I'm not gonna, but when it comes to the communication and the way that he played, a lot of lesser goalies would have let that goal affect them. And I like what Martin St. Louis said after the game. It's like he has the mentality of, okay, that play happened, next. and he doesn't get bogged down by what happened in the game. He's on to the next one and the next one. And this is what I love about Jacob Fowler, and this goes back to his USHL days. He lets in a bad goal. He lets in a second bad goal. Not a problem. He's back there and he's stopping every puck that's coming to him right after that. And that's exactly what he did for the Canadiens. The Canadiens just, when you're down 3-0, it's really hard to climb out of that hole. And that was a hole that was put in, they put themselves in because of a significant amount of turnovers that ultimately result in goals as of late. And I think that's the key here and so the Canadiens have to measure that with their ability to produce offense. I don't think that you can fault Jacob Fowler for the loss against the Rangers. I don't think you can fault him against the Philadelphia Flyers. You want to fault him for that third goal, go right ahead. But those that play know that it's the experienced defensemen that talk to the rookie goalie and give him instruction in those situations. So they recognize their fault in that, and I understand that. But Jacob Fowler took all the blame when we spoke to him. He said, something you got to figure out, you got to take into the experience bank, and then you're never going to do again. And unfortunately, you're never going to get a perfect goalie at the age of 21. You're going to get a goalie that has to learn, and he is learning. And I think this will be nothing but good for his development, as long as he's not asked to be the savior in all these situations.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is really pointing at him to be the guy in terms of, okay, be Ken Dryden, be Patrick Waugh, be the knight in shining armor riding in on the white horse to save the Montreal Canadiens and bring goaltending back to the forefront of the organization in terms of the standard I think we've all seen, depending on how old you are, right? And some uncanny mistakes. The Demidov just getting too fancy, tangled up with Alex Carrier. Nick Suzuki doing things Nick Suzuki doesn't really do in terms of creating turnovers that allows someone like Trevor Zegras to come in and just snipe city on Jacob Fowler. And like I mentioned already, credit to the Philadelphia Flyers. They came in, they played a solid, tight, borderline impenetrable road game last night, and forcing the Montreal Canadiens to kind of be perfect with their shooting attempts with 22 missed shots. What have you seen from the little advanced scouting? What have you seen from the Blackhawks here, the Canadiens' next opponent tomorrow?
Depends who plays. I know Connor Bedard isn't playing. We'll see if Artyom Levshunov is going to play.
Yeah, good job, Braden Shen. Good work there, Shen. Good stuff.
Okay.
Well, you disagree? You thought that was a good hockey play?
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying that from the eyes of a Habs fan. I was like, Jesus.
No, I mean, it was so, hated it.
Yeah, I know, but you're going to face that kind of a play in the playoffs anyway. So live and learn, I guess. But the way that I see the Chicago Blackhawks playing out, I mean, they're still a skilled team. You better watch out for Frank Nazar. I think he's excellent. Levshunov, we're going to see what he can do now from an offensive perspective. If there's no Connor Bedard to feed on the power play, we'll see. We'll see how the offense drives, because that's the thing, is most of the offense went through Connor Bedard. But man, Frank Nazar has been dangerous against the Canadiens dating back to last year. If you shut down Frank Nazar, you shut down the Chicago Blackhawks. That's the way I see it. So I am fully expecting the Canadiens to go top heavy against him, Nick Suzuki against his line, match in, match out, every shift. I'm fully expecting that. And then we'll see where everybody's at. But I think the line that's going to have to step up with that in terms of a matchup perspective is the Kapanen, Demidov, Slafkovsky line. I think it's prime for them to take advantage of a team like that, because there's a lot of either middling depth or a lot of inexperience. You look at Moore, you look at Lardis, a lot of these younger guys that they're bringing up at the same time. There's a lot of inexperience. So the Canadiens have the opportunity to take advantage of this right now if they wanted to, because Chicago is one of the few teams where the Canadiens can out-depth them right now in terms of true NHL talent. And I think that's where the Canadiens can take advantage. But the real problem to me, or the real key to victory, is going to be figuring out Spencer Knight, who's been having one heck of a season.
Looking forward to seeing hopefully a bunch of you next Tuesday. We're at Maison Publique McLean's for our watch party ahead of the Boston Bruins. We'll do a live show, and then we'll hang around, have some good eats with some great service, and watch the game in a cool atmosphere. That's Maison Publique McLean's on Peel in downtown Montreal. We'll be there on December 23rd. Marco, We'll be back Friday for our live show, and we'll see how the Canadiens do. If they can win a game on home ice, kind of get back on track here, stay very... I mean, they're still in the mix. They're a wild card team today, second wild card team right behind Washington. Pittsburgh Penguins are reeling. They've lost 6 in a row. We'll see what happens there moving forward. But the Eastern Conference remain as slammed, jammed, parity-filled as it's been all year. It's a lot watching the out-of-town scoreboard. Every night you're waking up to something different. All right, looking forward to that. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, guys. Have a great day.